Hi there. I'm 27 years old and my name is Elizabeth. It's been 2 years since Douglas and I tied the knot. The unanticipated death of Douglas's father, Keith, turned our lives upside down, and we still have no children. Everyone was taken aback by his unexpected passing from a heart attack. Neither Douglas nor I were close to his family back then. We were both living in a different state. As the youngest and only son of Keith, Douglas was expected to come home, according to Sutley, Douglas's uncle, who made the suggestion during the funeral. His mother, Ashley, who had just lost her husband, was particularly in need of his help, but he was needed by everyone in the family. The news that Douglas had made arrangements to move to an office closer to his family home was relayed to me a few months later. I was really distressed that he took this decision without consulting me. I thought we should have both decided on such a major life shift together. Douglas said he had anticipated my opposition to the concept and apologized when I voiced my dissatisfaction. He said he wanted to be closer to his mom so he could help her. He went on to say that he didn't want my damaged relationship with his mother, Ashley, to factor into his decision-making process. Ashley and I have never had an easy relationship. Due to our hectic schedules, we could only visit during long vacations when we lived far away. While Douglas's sisters, Stephanie and Catherine, reside close and pay us frequent visits, Ashley frequently griped about how infrequently we came to see. Douglas was always on our side, saying that it was hard for us to visit often due to our distance and his work obligations. But Ashley's primary gripe with me has always been, we have no children yet. She confronted us about our infertility on a summer visit and demanded to know why we hadn't started a family yet. For whatever reason, I felt tremendous shame at the time. In spite of everything, I still chose to relocate with Douglas. I thought I could handle that since we wouldn't be spending all our time at his mom's house. Ashley, to my surprise, appeared to be pleased with my choice. She went so far as to invite me over for tea a few weeks following our move. She had never before gone to such lengths, so I grudgingly agreed to accompany her. Ashley and Stephanie were waiting for me at their place when I got there. "Elizabeth, it's been so long," Stephanie replied with an air of sarcasm. "Since relocating here, why haven't you paid us a visit? It was a mistake for me to come. I was ecstatic when you chose to draw nearer, but it appears I was mistaken," Ashley said, her tone nearly gleeful. "Are you not fond of me?" Her remarks surprised me. Clearly, this relocation was not going to be as easy as I had anticipated. My previous anxiety had only grown, and I was beginning to fear that this next phase of our lives may provide obstacles for which I was unprepared. I considered validating Ashley's suspicion to gauge her response, but ultimately chose not to. I said, "I don't dislike you. Instead, my health has been suffering as a result of my transition to this new place." There was some truth to that. I had been resting at home a lot because I felt tired, and Douglas hadn't even told me about this visit. Why was I here to sit through their judgmental remarks? Ashley wasted no time accusing me of not liking her. But wasn't it the other way around? How were we supposed to get along when the atmosphere was always like this? Before I could even process her words, Stephanie jumped in sharply, saying, "How can you talk to your mother-in-law like that? Apologize to her right now." I expected Ashley to get angry or scold me, but what she said next left me completely surprised. "You're right," she said. "I've been mean, and I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I'm also sorry about the things I said about children. I was being nosy." Her tone wasn't sarcastic or harsh. It was genuinely apologetic. I braced myself, expecting some hidden jab or lecture, but it didn't come. Even Stephanie looked surprised. Then Ashley confessed something that caught me off guard. "All I've ever wanted is to hold a grandchild," she said quietly. She explained that Stephanie's husband was infertile and Catherine seemed to be having trouble conceiving as well. Because of this, Ashley had pinned all her hopes on Douglas and me. I had known about Stephanie and Catherine's struggles, and hearing this softened my frustration a little. Douglas and I had talked about having children, and were considering it, but I didn't like the pressure Ashley was putting on us. I decided to speak up. "Please just give us some time," I said, lowering my head slightly. "We're thinking about it, but it's not something that can be rushed. I'm sorry if I've upset you." Ashley nodded, and the tension seemed to fade. "Do visit us sometimes," I added softly, trying to bridge the gap between us. After that, Ashley and Stephanie turned their attention back to the TV. Ashley casually remarked, "I like this announcer. She's so energetic and bright." As I watched them chatting and sipping their tea, I felt a small pang of regret. Maybe if I had been more outgoing or approachable, things might have been different between us. It was a fleeting thought, but I couldn't ignore it. For the first time, I felt like there was a chance things could improve. Later that evening, my optimism was crushed. Douglas came home visibly upset. "I heard from Mom that you told her you have no intention of getting along with her. She was crying, Elizabeth. What did you say?" he demanded. I was stunned. Earlier, he'd left with a smile, but now he seemed to think I'd caused a disaster. "Douglas, there's been a misunderstanding," I tried to explain. "I only said it's hard to build a friendship given how things are now. How does that mean I don't want to get along?" But Douglas didn't seem convinced. The fragile progress I thought we'd made with Ashley felt like it was unraveling already. I was scared. Douglas now seemed to fully believe Ashley's twisted version of events. The smile he had earlier felt like a lie, and I didn't know how to handle this situation. I tried to explain myself again, but he wasn't convinced. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Stephanie. It read, "After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here with us, you need to be more patient." Douglas glanced at me, and his expression echoed Stephanie's words. I felt overwhelmed. I had moved here because I cared about being with him, not to win over Ashley or Stephanie. Facing Douglas, I looked him in the eye and said, "It's clear that Ashley and the others might never approve of me. Maybe you should consider being with someone she likes more." Before I realized it, the word divorce slipped out of my mouth for the first time. Douglas looked truly alarmed. "Wait, hold on," he said, bewildered. "How did we jump to divorce? I just want you to get along better with my family." He didn't seem to understand that his family might never fully accept me, no matter what I did. It left me feeling even more confused. But Douglas, to his credit, seemed determined to fix things. The next day, he came home late from work and shared what had happened. He told me he had spoken to Ashley, and she admitted there had been a misunderstanding. She even apologized. "What a fuss," he said casually, as if it was all over now. Then Douglas mentioned that Ashley's birthday was coming up. "How about we celebrate her birthday at a nice restaurant?" he suggested. The sudden shift from conflict to celebration was hard for me to process. It felt like we had jumped from chaos to pretending everything was fine. But I could see Douglas was trying to make things better, even if the path ahead felt shaky. Douglas suggested that if we made it seem like the dinner was my idea, it might help Ashley see me in a better light. I wasn't sure if Ashley would appreciate the gesture, given her complicated nature, but I agreed to make the reservation. I invited Stephanie and the others, booking a table for 8. Douglas approved of the plan, but as the dinner approached, I felt a growing unease. Douglas had been distant lately. His responses to me were short and indifferent, making me feel isolated. On the night of the dinner, we arrived at the restaurant to find Ashley, Stephanie, and their spouses already seated. The host led Douglas and me to the table, giving us a polite but questioning look that only made my nerves worse. "Happy birthday, Ashley," I said, trying to sound cheerful. Deep down, I wondered if this dinner was really going to improve anything or if it was just another way for me to feel out of place. I greeted Ashley cheerfully, hoping to ease some of the tension and bridge the gap between us. However, she didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, she turned to everyone else, thanking them for coming to celebrate her birthday. Her deliberate snub stung, and I couldn't help but feel hurt. Stephanie seemed confused by the atmosphere. "I thought this was supposed to be a family gathering," she said, glancing at me with a puzzled expression. Catherine, noticing the tension, looked at me with concern. In that moment, I realized I was being excluded on purpose. Determined not to let it ruin my evening, I decided to keep to myself and leave early. Just as I settled on this plan, a staff member approached our table, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people, he said. Confused, I replied, "That can't be right. I clearly reserved for 8. Could there be a mistake?" The staff member hesitated, then explained, "About a week ago, we received a call from a gentleman asking to change the reservation to 7. I froze. Slowly, I turned to Douglas, searching for an explanation. His response floored me. "Yes, 7 is correct. Everyone's here now," he said plainly, confirming that he had made the change himself. A wave of disbelief and betrayal washed over me. Douglas's actions spoke volumes. Despite his earlier promises to mend things, his efforts to smooth family tensions had been shallow at best. I felt manipulated and deeply hurt, realizing he had orchestrated this behind my back. Before I could process everything, Douglas turned to me with an accusatory glare. "I heard from Mom that you've been undermining our family," he began, his voice sharp. "She said you've been telling people I don't earn enough and that I'm insensitive. You had a lot to say, didn't you?" His words hit me like a punch in the gut. I was stunned. It turned out that a week ago, when Douglas had contacted Ashley about the dinner, she had filled his head with lies. Blinded by anger and believing her, he had called the restaurant, pretended to be me, and changed the reservation to 7. The staff, recognizing the family name, hadn't questioned the change. I couldn't believe Douglas had been so easily manipulated. The realization that he had sided with Ashley without even asking me for the truth was deeply unsettling. In that moment, I questioned why I was even there. I confronted Douglas, demanding that he apologize to everyone at the table and reflect on his actions. But instead of apologizing, he did something unexpected. He insisted that his actions were justified. "I just wanted to make sure things went smoothly," he said, as if that excused everything. His refusal to take responsibility made it clear that the distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I didn't know how or if it could be repaired. I thought about apologizing to my in-laws just to keep the peace. But deep down, I knew I couldn't do it. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I refused to admit to things I never said. Besides, what was the point of a marriage where my husband believed his mother over me? Tears of frustration filled my eyes as I questioned why I had even followed Douglas here. Seeing my distress, Douglas began to panic, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Ashley, watching everything unfold, had a smug smile on her face. Clearly, she was satisfied that her plan was working. Her manipulations had succeeded in driving a wedge between us. I looked at Douglas coldly and said, "Next time, marry someone younger and more obedient. Maybe then you'll have children and be happier." Ashley's response was swift and cutting. "Elizabeth, why don't you just go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is always an outsider. I can't see you as family. You're not charming at all, so please leave quickly." Her words stung, but they also solidified my decision. "I'll leave even without you telling me," I said firmly. "I'd like to see anyone get along with someone as twisted as you." With that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant. Douglas stayed behind, silent, with his head in his hands. Just as I reached the exit, I heard someone calling my name. I turned to see Catherine and her husband hurrying after me. "Elizabeth, wait," Catherine said, clearly upset. "I can't stand it anymore. Mom and Stephanie haven't changed at all. I knew the gossip about you wasn't true." Catherine's words brought me a small sense of relief. In the middle of all this chaos, someone finally stood up for me. Her acknowledgement of the truth, though brief, felt like a lifeline. "I'm ready to cut ties with all this toxicity," Catherine added, her voice steady and resolute. It was a surprising moment of solidarity. And while it didn't erase the pain of what had just happened, it gave me a glimmer of hope that not everyone in Douglas's family was against me. As I stood there processing Catherine's words, my phone buzzed. Ashley's name flashed on the screen. I sighed, wondering what she wanted now. Before I could decide whether to answer, the name on the screen changed to Douglas's. Catherine and her husband exchanged knowing looks. "Elizabeth, you might want to go back to the restaurant," Catherine said cryptically. "You might see something interesting." Her eyes hinted at a twist I hadn't expected. They left, looking oddly satisfied. But I hesitated. Curiosity battled with my need to stay far away from the drama. In the end, curiosity won. When I finally answered Douglas's call, his voice sounded frantic and filled with regret. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry," he said, his tone desperate. "I didn't realize it was all a lie," Douglas blurted out on the phone. "I'll send the divorce papers later," he added hastily. But then his tone changed. "Wait, can you come back, please? It's a lifetime request." His almost childish plea made me want to laugh, but Catherine's cryptic hint earlier lingered in my mind. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to return to the restaurant. When I arrived, the scene before me was nothing like I had expected. A crowd had gathered around Douglas's table, and at the center of it all was a local TV announcer, Ashley's favorite, speaking into a microphone. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Ashley looked flustered, stumbling over her words as she tried to explain herself. "No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding," she stammered. Douglas and Stephanie sat awkwardly, their discomfort written all over their faces. They clearly hadn't anticipated this sudden turn of events. The announcer, holding the microphone with authority, pressed Ashley for answers. "You loudly declared in the restaurant that Elizabeth is an outsider and should leave. What did you mean by that? Please explain in detail." Ashley's face turned pale, and her usual confidence seemed to evaporate. The tables had turned, and now she was the one under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Catherine's husband and a few others who had been offended earlier quietly left, wanting no part in the escalating drama. I stood frozen, watching this surreal scene unfold. It took me a moment to piece together what was happening. It seemed that our family conflict had turned into a public spectacle, possibly even being broadcast live. My earlier frustration gave way to a mix of vindication and disbelief as I tried to make sense of it all. A staff member approached me, noticing my confusion. "It's been quite a day, hasn't it?" they remarked with a wry smile. They explained that the restaurant had scheduled a live TV recording that day, which explained the announcer's presence. The camera crew and microphones had captured everything, turning our family dinner into an unexpected media event. The realization that our drama had been broadcast for all to see was both shocking and oddly satisfying. Ashley's harsh words, which she had so confidently uttered earlier, were now laid bare for everyone to judge. Just as I stepped aside to gather my thoughts, I noticed the announcer approach Ashley with a smile. "Would you mind giving an interview?" she asked brightly. Ashley, an avid fan of the announcer, looked thrilled. "An interview? Absolutely," she exclaimed, forgetting her earlier embarrassment. The announcer beamed. "The topic is daughter-in-law and mother-in-law relationships." Ashley's face faltered for a moment, realizing the irony of the situation. I couldn't help but smirk as I watched her wrestle with her own words. The evening had taken a bizarre turn, but in some strange way, justice had been served. We heard there was a heated argument earlier, and the daughter-in-law left in tears. "Can you tell us what happened?" the announcer asked, turning the spotlight directly on Ashley. Ashley and Stephanie froze, their faces pale. They were clearly caught off guard and didn't know how to respond. The truth was too embarrassing to admit. They had deliberately manipulated the situation to alienate me. From across the room, Douglas saw me and rushed over, his face full of desperation. "Elizabeth, please," he begged. "I can't let this shame be known. It was all a misunderstanding." His voice cracked, and he looked completely defeated. But by then I had no sympathy left for him. Whatever feelings I once had for Douglas had evaporated. Ashley, trying to save face, forced a strange smile and attempted to smooth things over. "Oh, we usually call each other Elizabeth. Elizabeth, come here," she called out, waving me over. I walked up slowly, knowing I had nothing left to lose. The announcer directed the microphone toward me. "You say you call each other Elizabeth, but how does the daughter-in-law view her mother-in-law?" I smiled faintly, my voice calm. "I've never been called Elizabeth by her," I said, looking Ashley in the eye. "What I've been called, though, is unpatriotic, because I haven't had children yet. Ashley has made it clear she thinks that's reason enough for a divorce." The crowd murmured, and Ashley's smile faltered. I continued, my tone steady. "The truth is, Douglas and I haven't felt ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried in over 2 years, but that's never stopped Ashley from criticizing me." I paused, then added, "When I first fell ill and had to take a leave from work, Douglas was supportive. I appreciated that and decided to follow him here, thinking a change of environment might help me recover. But this is the result." I gestured to the scene around us. By then I felt no sadness, only detachment. As I spoke, I noticed Ashley and Stephanie's expressions. They looked utterly humiliated, their earlier confidence replaced with embarrassment. For the first time all day, I felt a small sense of satisfaction. The announcer, sensing the weight of my words, didn't interrupt. As I glanced at the cameras, I realized this might be broadcast nationwide. Watching Ashley squirm under the scrutiny, I couldn't help but smile. "Well," I said, turning back to Ashley, "since the daughter-in-law is considered an outsider, I guess I should leave. Goodbye." I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring the shouts and commotion behind me. The day had been long, chaotic, and emotionally draining, but as I stepped outside, I felt an unexpected sense of freedom. For the first time, I didn't feel weighed down by the drama. I felt lighter, as though I had finally let go of the toxic environment I had tried so hard to endure. And with that, I kept walking, savoring the release of leaving it all behind. Felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. After everything that had happened, even though Ashley and her family managed to prevent the footage from being broadcast, the incident had already caused quite a stir in our local community. The story spread quickly among relatives and acquaintances, becoming the center of gossip and speculation. After the drama, I returned to my room, packed my belongings, and moved back to my parents' house. I sent Douglas the divorce papers, but he took his time responding. Frustrated by the delay, I started considering hiring a lawyer to finalize things. To my surprise, Douglas showed up at my parents' doorstep one day. My father, Gerald, who is usually calm and composed, handled the situation firmly. Douglas apologized sincerely, saying he wanted to cut ties with his family and promising to trust me completely moving forward. But his words felt hollow to me. It was too little, too late. Gerald, visibly upset by the pain Douglas had caused me over the years, didn't hold back. "Why didn't you realize this sooner?" he asked sharply. "What have you done to Elizabeth all these years? Just sign the divorce papers and leave." Douglas's regret was written all over his face. Shaking, he handed over the signed divorce papers. His handwriting was shaky and barely legible, but it didn't matter. Our marriage was formally dissolved once the necessary paperwork was done without any problems. The reality of Stephanie's predicament became clear to me not long after that. Contrary to what she had said, her infertility was actually caused by her personal health problems and not her husband. Her own marriage also ended in divorce as a result of this revelation. She ceased being an involved family member and stopped visiting Ashley. Douglas moved back in with Ashley in their little town after getting a divorce. I stopped worrying about their lives, even though they probably had to deal with constant gossip and criticism from others around them. At long last, that part of my life was behind me. My situation started to improve in the months that came after. A classmate of mine from my hometown and I got back in touch. We wed after falling madly in love. This marriage was full of joy and understanding, in contrast to my first. Our lovely daughter was born shortly after, and she is already 1 year old. I am currently expecting our second kid, which brings us even more delight. When compared to Ashley, my new mother-in-law couldn't be more different. She treats me with the utmost respect and kindness, and she is always there for me. She has been an incredible gift to me, providing a level of family love and support I never imagined possible. Life is full of surprises, but I am now content and loved. I am now able to experience the joy and support that I once believed were unattainable. Furthermore, I will be eternally thankful for this new phase of my life.